Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Mike Lee.
Thank you very much. It's a beautiful day in America. Amen. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Mike Lee, and I am not running for president. Now, I think I'm one of very few people who can say that today and at least have any of you believe me in saying it. But that's exactly why I'm here. And I think it's part of the reason why I was asked to speak at the very beginning of the program today. As I see it, I have a different task up here than a lot of the other speakers today. I'm here to talk very candidly with you as one conservative not running for president to another conservative not running for president. And I'm here to talk to you about the immense task that lies before us over the next year or so. Because you and I, we have a job to do. I hope everyone here realizes that. Because over the next year and a half, everyone in this room, for every single one of us, it's going to be our job very, very soon to choose the next president of the United States of America. Now, that's going to be our job if, that is, we're up to it. So I'm asking you right now, what do you think? Are we up to it? Are we as conservatives ready to pick the next great president of the United States? Are you sure? I hope so. Because let's be very, very honest here for a minute. In recent years, we haven't been. Since Ronald Reagan left the White House in 1989, we've had 6 presidential elections. My party's nominee, the Republican nominee, has lost the popular vote in 5 of those last 6 presidential elections. I'm here to tell you, if we don't choose a serious, principled, proven conservative in 2016, that number is going to be 6 out of 7, and we can't let that happen. Yes. Those are the stakes. Now, for the conservatives running for president, the hardest part of their job will begin on January 20th, 2017. That sounds great, by the way, doesn't it? The hardest part of their job will begin the day they take the oath of office, the day they assume the presidency. But for those of us conservatives who are not running for president, the hardest part of our job starts right now. Now is the time, right now, before the campaign truly begins in earnest, for us to think long and hard about the kind of candidate that we're looking for, about the kind of candidate that we want, the kind of candidate that the country needs. I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And if it's all right, I'd like to tell you about the kind of leader that I'm looking for and why I think you might look for him or her too, right along with me. Principled, positive, and proven. It seems to me that conservatives need to be looking for these 3 characteristics in a candidate, looking for a candidate who is these 3 things, who is principled and positive and proven. So let's go through each of these individually. First, what does it mean to be principled? Well, I think it means that you're being a conservative every single day, not just during the campaign. That's right. Principled means, it means there are no buts in your conservative communication, as in, I'm personally pro-life, but, or I want to repeal Obamacare, but. A principled conservative doesn't hide behind talking points. He tells you what he thinks, and he tells you why. That's not to say that we all have to agree on every single issue, because we don't and we won't. Serious conservatives disagree on issues all the time. And real conservatives don't run from these disagreements. In fact, we embrace them. We run toward them. Speaking at this very conference in 1977, Ronald Reagan explained the importance of open, robust dialogue, not only as a way to purify the conservative movement, but more importantly, as a way to expand it. Here's what he said. He said, quote, "If we truly believe in our principles, we should sit down and talk. Talk with anyone, anywhere, at any time, if it means talking about the principles for the Republican Party. Conservatism is not a narrow ideology, nor is it the exclusive property of conservative activists." This is crucial for us to remember as we make our choices in 2016. Now, very often you can learn a lot more about a candidate when he disagrees with you than when he agrees. When a principled conservative disagrees with you on an issue, he admits it. He admits it right up front. And he has an authentically conservative reason for doing so. You see, that's how you can tell the difference between someone who's a conservative on the stump, on the one hand, and on the other hand, someone who is truly a conservative, in his head and in his heart, all the time. Okay, so that's principled. We've talked about what it means to be principled. Next, let's talk about what it means for a candidate to be positive. A great man once said that a true soldier fights not because he hates what's in front of him, but rather because he loves what's behind him. Conservatives need to hold to this exact same standard. Because true conservatism isn't just about the kind of government we don't want. It's about the kind of country we do want. This has been true ever since America's founding. As much as we honor it, the Boston Tea Party was just a protest. Dramatic and inspirational and necessary, yes, absolutely. But it was also inherently limited in its effect. Today, the Boston Tea Party would be remembered at best as only a minor footnote in history. If that very same generation of Americans, that same generation of Americans whose patriots boarded ships in Boston Harbor and seized tea, English tea, and cast it into the harbor in symbolic protest against the kind of big, overtaxing, over-regulating national government in London they did not want. It would have been only a footnote in history if that same generation of Americans had not made their way to Philadelphia 14 years later to write the Constitution, our 227-year-old founding document. Like our founding patriots, the positive conservative I'm looking for can tell us more than about what he's against. He will always tell us what he's for. He's got a plan. He has specific political ideas about how to unite and grow our coalition. And he has specific policy ideas to reform our government. Now, he doesn't hesitate to tell you in specific and concrete terms exactly what those ideas are. Specificity here is crucial, it's critical, it's essential. Generalizations and abstractions are the province of candidates who say one thing on the campaign trail, but do quite another thing once they're in office. So if conservatives truly want a government that is of, by, and for the people, we need to demand that our candidates tell us specifically how they'll fix our tax code, how they'll reform our broken healthcare and education systems, how they'll put an end to corporate welfare like the Export-Import Bank and too-big-to-fail Wall Street banks. So we're looking here not just for platitudes, but for policies. Please join me in that effort to find that candidate. Okay, so we've covered what it means to be principled, and we've covered what it means to be positive. Now, finally, let's talk about what it means for a candidate to be proven. Well, to me, it means two things. First, I'm looking for someone who has proven himself by winning big, difficult fights on election days. And then, secondly, I'm looking for someone who has won big, difficult fights after election day, while in office. We shouldn't be looking for just one of those and then rolling the dice on the other. That won't work. Conservatives must demand both. A candidate who has shown he can win elections and later shown that he deserved to win those same elections. In other words, we want someone who has stood on principle when the going got tough, and someone who has the battle scars to prove it.
That's right.
Yet, we also want someone who's shown he can win broad mandates and build diverse coalitions to overcome entrenched interests, and not just the special interests in the other party, but those in his own party. The conservative candidate who ignores moderates is as misguided as the moderate candidate who ignores conservatives. The candidate we all deserve, every one of us, can attract both without alienating either.
That's right.
Now, right now, we don't have any candidates yet, and everyone deserves an equal chance to meet that standard. But make no mistake, that should be the standard. This leads me to my final point. Meeting that standard that I've described, principled, positive, and proven, isn't just going to be up to the candidates themselves. It's going to be up to us, every one of us, and lots of other people all over the country. Just as businesses in the free market follow consumer demand, political candidates take their cues from the voters. We have the power in this process, but only if we're willing to use it. Only if we're willing to expect more out of our would-be leaders, and only if we're willing to expect more out of ourselves. We have a job to do, and that job is not just to find the guy who can shout freedom the loudest. It's not just the guy who can tell the best Joe Biden jokes. By the way, did you hear what Joe Biden said the other day? Never mind, it's too easy. If that's what conservatives reward, and if that's all they reward in the next year and over the next 2 days here at CPAC, if that's what they reward with cheers and standing ovations and straw poll votes, then that's all that we as conservatives will ever get. Talking points and platitudes and empty promises. But when conservatives elevate unserious presidential candidates, candidates who are not principled, positive, and proven, it's not the media's fault. It's not the establishment's fault. It's our fault, and we can't let that happen. Republican presidential candidates in 2016 are only going to be as good as conservatives demand them to be in 2015. And that's why we're here today. So let's demand, starting right here and right now, that these candidates are going to be extraordinary. Not one candidate we will support will be anything short of that. Imagine for a moment the impression this audience could leave a candidate if each of you refused to give a standing ovation to every trite one-liner, every empty platitude, or every hollow political slogan that you hear over the next day and a half, and yeah, you will hear some of those. Or imagine if no one in the conservative movement, not a single soul, donated a dime of their money or a moment of their time to any candidate who talks a big game about cutting big government, but never gets around to explaining how he would fix broken government. I guarantee you, every one of our serious presidential candidates would immediately run on a positive, innovative, and unapologetically conservative agenda. Yes, they would run on an agenda that takes our timeless principles and applies them to the unique challenges of our time. An agenda that empowers the individuals, the families, and communities that Washington's corrupt nexus of big government, big business, and big special interests leaves behind. Imagine the conservative leader who would emerge from that campaign, what he could do to reunite our party, to reconnect it with the American people, and reform the government policies holding them back. That's a candidate, and that's a campaign we can all look forward to. more importantly, far more importantly, that's the candidate and that's the campaign the American people have been waiting for. It's the candidate Americans deserve and the one conservatives can produce, if and only if we stay true to our own highest ideals. That's the candidate I'm looking for in 2016. And I'm here to ask for your help to find him. Thank you very much, and may God bless the United States of America.
Good morning, Senator Lee.
Morning.
Thank you for your remarks. I'm Kimberly, and I'm the moderator for all of the potential presidential candidates. Are you sure you're not running?
I'm sure.
Okay, but can I still ask you a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. First question is from our Twitter feed from conservatives across the country, hashtag CPACQ. And the question is, will you stand with Congress if they choose to fund DHS?
Will I stand with Congress if they choose to fund DHS?
DHS, yes, sir.
Okay. So this question is focusing on something that the President did in November of 2014. The President of the United States chose to effectively rewrite our immigration code. This is one of the solemn responsibilities given to Congress under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It's our job to write laws. All legislative power, meaning all power to write laws, belongs to Congress. And we have a series of laws on the books that govern immigration and naturalization, the process by which people come into the country and eventually, in some cases, become assimilated as citizens. The President issued an executive order that would make legal millions and millions of people who are currently inside the country illegally. Our laws don't authorize this action, and so if it's carried out, if it's implemented, this action will have the effect of undoing something that Congress has done, and doing so in a way that circumvents the Constitution. Now, we have the means at our disposal to stop that. The means to do this are the means described by James Madison in the Federalist Papers. We have to use the power of the purse. We have to withhold funding when the President does that. So if the question is whether I will vote to fund the President's executive amnesty program, no, I will not, and I ask my colleagues in Congress to stand with me.
Thank you for that answer. And since you're not running for president, I want to just say we think you're great.
Thank you.
And the second question...
I will be on the ballot in 2016, but it will be in one state, my home state of Utah.
Okay, sounds good. And the second and last question is, what is your biggest criticism of President Obama? You only have a couple minutes to answer that, by the way.
There's a poem that comes to mind. Let me count the ways. Yeah. Okay, so our founding fathers put together a government. And they put together a government under a system, a constitutional system, that has fostered the development of the greatest civilization the world has ever known. We're great as Americans. We've been successful as a country, not because of who we are, but because of what we do. We're successful as a country because we believe in freedom, and freedom is great, not just because it's awesome in the abstract. Freedom is great because of the things that free people do when they're allowed to be free. They come together and they form voluntary associations like families and churches and synagogues and charitable organizations. The founding generation understood that free markets and voluntary associations like these don't happen. They can't happen if government becomes oppressive. And they also understood something about power. That there's great harm that can come from government if you allow too much power to be concentrated in the hands of one person or in the hands of a few people. And so they split up power very, very carefully. They split it up because, see, as British colonies, we had experienced a lot of problems from this. We were subject to a national government that was too big, that was too expensive, that taxed us too much, that regulated us too heavily, that was so far from the people that it was slow to respond to their needs. Does any of that sound familiar? And so when we set up our new government, we instinctively split up power. We split it up along a horizontal axis first, along a horizontal axis, and then we split it up on a vertical axis, meaning we put most of the power in the states and the local governments, where the power was closest to the people. We put a few powers in our national government. We'd put it in charge of just a few basic things: national defense, weights and measures, trademarks, copyrights, and patents, the power to declare war. Then there's my favorite power of Congress, the power to grant letters of marque and reprisal. A letter of marque and reprisal is sort of a hall pass issued by Congress that allows you to be a pirate on the high seas in the name of the United States. Really cool stuff. So they split it up by putting most of the power with the states and the localities, and then they also split it up within the federal government by saying that Congress will make the laws, the president will execute and enforce the laws, and the judiciary will interpret the laws. He's disregarded these powers. He's disregarded these limits. He's allowed too much power to accumulate in the federal government. He's drawn more and more of it in. And most of this power, he has put in the executive branch. He has put in himself. This, my friends, is not a good way to run government. This, my friends, is a way that leads to bad things. We've got to turn it around. We've got to bring back our separation of powers. We've got to bring back the power when it is limited at the federal level. And we've got to restore a state of affairs that James Madison described in Federalist 45 when he said, "The powers of the federal government are few and defined, while those reserved to the states are numerous and indefinite. When we reserve power to the people, we all benefit. Freedom is maximized. Free markets and civil society will flourish. And everyone in America does better. The poor get out of poverty. The middle class can get ahead." That's what we're about. That's what it means to be a conservative. And that's why I'm here with you today. We've got to restore these separations of power that have been lost. Thank you very much.
Senator Lee, we so appreciate you being with us this morning. God bless.